Good evening. I'm Peter Hasland. Welcome to Global Dialogue. My guests are Patrick Doherty and Puck Mykleby. His real name is Mark, but we'll call him Puck. And they are from the New America Foundation, a think tank dedicated to analysis and thoughtful appreciation of American future policy. They're here to talk about a new strategy, a grand strategy for the United States. And Puck, maybe I start with you. Why do we need a new strategy?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us, Peter. I mean, beautiful Santa Barbara. But why do we need a good or a new grand strategy? Well, I guess just from my perspective is a retired Marine. But when I was working for Admiral Mullen in the Pentagon to look at this notion of grand strategy, the guy that I was working with, Navy Captain Wayne Porter, for us, it wasn't lost on us that if you look at any trend line, whether it's our physical condition, whether it's our fiscal condition, whether it's our political condition, our social condition, we in America right now in the 21st century really are not trending in a very positive direction. And that doesn't mean that we're lost, that our best days are behind us, but it's a call that we need to get our act together in the 21st century, that American leadership is still a viable option for the rest of the world. But we have to walk the talk, and we have to address our problem sets with a little bit of emotional and intellectual honesty. And the only discipline that's going to be able to allow us to address our current condition and craft a more positive future, not only for ourselves, but for our kids and our grandkids and for this republic, is that discipline of grand strategy. Something that we used to do. We haven't done it always, but when we've done it well. And that is what I believe was a sense of Admiral Mullen when he asked Wayne Porter and I to take a look at grand strategy. That's what has led me to work now with Patrick Doherty on, okay, if we can figure out this issue, this discipline of grand strategy, what should that grand strategy be? And most importantly, how would you go and implement it?
Well, let's first of all look at what you've come up with. What have you discovered?
Well, the first thing we had to discover was really get a good solid definition of what grand strategy is and what it has been for the country, and it's useful to start there. Grand strategy, we believe, is the correlation of our economic engine, our governing institutions, and our foreign policy to meet a great global challenge. We did this in World War II, we did this in the Cold War. We now think it's time to do it again. The American way of grand strategy is fundamentally to have our economic engine do the heavy lifting. We were the arsenal of democracy in World War II, and we outperformed and outlasted the Soviets while we contained them militarily. We think it's time to do that again, and we think there's a vibrant, robust, and very prosperous economic engine waiting to be unlocked because of great demographic shifts here in the United States and around the world. And we think taking advantage of that opportunity, we can get the $16 trillion American economic engine as a wind at our backs globally, and begin to do as what Puck said a moment ago, is to walk the talk and move from being a laggard to a leader in solving the great global challenges of the international community.
Are we a laggard? I mean, how do you see us as a laggard?
You know, I would say for the last 20 years, America has had a national default strategy of stability, and we call this, the academics call this liberal hegemony. The goal was really to hedge in an uncertain world. In the early days after the Cold War, we didn't know the lay of the land, and so we said, let's. And we thought that capitalism, American-style capitalism, had proven itself the most effective system in the world. But we didn't have our eye really on what the future was bringing, what the 21st century was bringing. We've perpetuated that same hedging strategy now for a good over 20 years. And we believe that the world has shown what the 21st century is going to be throwing at us. And it's time to really look hard at and measure those challenges that are coming up at us. They're great, they're consequential, and then adapt our strategy, adapt our economic engine, adapt our governing institutions, adapt our foreign policy to meet those challenges.
But I'd also want to throw out that we don't have to define ourselves on by threat and risk. I mean, the institutions coming out of the Cold War that we're still, we still operate, we still use that same framework organizationally, cognitively, of looking at threat and risk and how do we prevent bad stuff from happening. That's not in the American DNA. So we are a nation of opportunity, and so what we are opining is that whatever the grand strategy of the United States is going to be, it's not going to be defined by an external threat. Well, we have this a great global challenge, what we call global unsustainability. The system itself is unsustainable. The beauty, the thing that America can bring to the table on a global scale is that there's an opportunities way out. That is the power of grand strategy, that it's not going to be defined on the things that we're afraid of, or the changes that are going to be coming at us, climate change being a great deliverer of great changes, but that we do have an opportunities way out. That's powerful. That's what makes a grand strategy.
So you're not arguing that George Kennan was wrong when he put forth the idea of containment?
No. At the time and place of the Cold War, it was the right thing to do. I mean, remember that when after NSC 68, George Kennan's concepts got a little bit more militarized. Yeah. However, in the basic concept, that's what carried us through the Cold War. I mean, we went from the gamut of massive retaliation through flexible response to détente. I mean, that's a pretty flexible piece of gear when you look at the span of our engagement with the Soviet Union. We need to have some kind of organizing logic that applies to our 21st century reality right now. And stop looking back to our 20th century past. I mean, it worked then. It's not working for us now. So much so that I would argue that trying to keep that system going, keeping it on life support, we're actually in a position where we're expending our national prosperity in pursuit of some illusory condition of security that's based on our 20th century past. What our concept for a grand strategy, specifically that sustainability can become that organizing logic, that 21st century imperative for this nation, is going to allow us to synergistically not only get prosperity, but security. You can't have one without the other. And that is what we're striving, trying to take a more systems approach with the resources we have and the challenges we face, but to take that opportunities way forward and show the rest of the world how it can be done.
So if containment was based on the notion that there was a threat out there, and we had to prepare for that threat. And we had basically two options, either to go on the offensive or to encircle the Soviet Union. But threat was very much a part of it. But now you're saying threat should not be a part, or are you? Are you saying threat is...
The threats exist.
Okay.
I mean, the threats, the scale of the threats. I mean, just if we, again, taking a look at the unsustainable system that we have. I mean, just for taking a look at how we produce food. I mean, the level of soil erosion. This is a huge national security issue. Almost 50% of, around 50% of Iowa's topsoil is gone just by the way we farm. Some places in the breadbasket of America, 75% of the soil has been eroded. That's a huge challenge. The Ogallala Aquifer that is the source of irrigation for America's food is already being depleted at a scale it can't be replenished. I mean, these are national security issues. So there are plenty of threats out there. Climate change is a threat that we have to be aware of. But we can't allow that to define us, to prevent us from acting. So there's an opportunities way out. And just like in the Cold War, while we had the specter of the Soviet Union, global communism, and the nuclear holocaust, we still took an opportunities way forward. We leveraged our economy. We used the demographic shifts in the United States from post-World War to allow that returning GIs to fuel our economy in the form of suburban sprawl. We had kept, Patrick's far better equipped to talk about the economics of it, but we kept material prices low so we could provide a consumer lifestyle to Americans. So they're buying goods. We created that type of economic environment of opportunity to live the good life and carry us forward. We can do that again. It's just we have to recalibrate the machine.
Fundamentally, our strategy in the Cold War was to avoid a war with the Soviet Union, but to defeat them in a long-term contest of economic and political systems. We rested more heavily our strategy and our long-term success in the future of the Republic on our economic engine than on our military might. It was our economic engine that provided the excess federal revenues necessary to purchase and build and develop those weapon systems. So we relied fundamentally on the foundation of that economy. And what we're saying is that today America has to think in the same mode. That our economic
and scale,
absolutely. That we have to think at the scale of the system, not address individual issues in a crisis management mode. The days for crisis management are long past. Now, fundamentally, we need to rethink the system. We have to re-engineer how America's economic engine produces prosperity and creates the conditions in which America can be both secure and sustainable.
Yeah, crisis management is so tempting, though. I mean, something happens and, oh, you have a crisis to manage. Oh, why is that?
You know, it's a problem of leadership to some extent. It's a problem that is built into our system of executive government. Most administrations come into office with an idea about what they want to do, and that roughly translates to a strategy. Usually it's not a grand strategy, but they have an idea of what they want to accomplish by the end of their 4 years, the end of their 8 years. The reality is, unless and until we adopt a new grand strategy to address these converging challenges and tap into the extraordinary opportunities that we've identified, the crises are going to come faster and harder and overwhelm the ability for any administration to get out in front, unless and until you take a step back and say, we need to overlay a new strategic concept onto our responses. And then when an opportunity, when a challenge comes up, a crisis comes up, like a Ukraine or like the Arab Spring, you see this in this crisis an opportunity to leverage it towards your strategic ends, not just to re-stabilize the old order. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, and just, I guess from a philosophical perspective, and maybe even a cultural perspective, you asked the question, why do we love that crisis? Because it does give a faux sense of control. That here's something I can do about it. I can apply the machinery that currently exists and show the efficacy of what we currently have, mm-hmm. and it just allows us to validate the machinery that we've grown to love, and become comfortable with. Because change is hard, particularly at the scale we're talking about. But that doesn't, just because it worked in the past doesn't mean it's working for us now. It's just basically delaying an inevitable crisis that we're not going to be able to, because the instruments that we currently have are not going to be able to cope with.
So let's say we have a presidential election, and for some strange reason, I am elected President of the United States. I hear about you two guys, and I said, come on into my office and let's talk. What are you going to tell me?
I'm going to say, I would say right off the bat, at the macro level, you need to leverage the private sector. If we really want to make this happen, you're going to have the private sector pave the way forward, just because the institutions themselves of governance.
What do they have to do?
I think what they have to do is, first of all, focus in on where the opportunities in our economy are. And we basically see three big opportunities in front of us in terms of demand. Number one is in housing, believe it or not, around walkable community smart growth housing. I mean, the demographic trends of the United States right now are very historic in nature, where we see the convergence of the baby boomers and millennials coming together, seeking the same basic housing purchase for their next house purchase. Baby boomers are downsizing. They want to be stuck up in the suburbs anymore. Millennials, they don't want to be in the suburbs in the first place. They want to be more in an interconnected, walkable, mixed-use, mixed-income, service-rich, transit-oriented type community. Huge opportunity. So much so that it's 3 times the level of demand that what the returning GIs provided to our economy post-World War II. And we know that demand fueled our economy through the late 70s, early 80s. Huge.
Well, I would say, Puck, I like your thinking, because those people vote. Tell me more. What are the other 2 areas that
the other 2 areas, the second one is around agriculture, specifically regenerative agriculture. According to the OECD, we need to increase global food supply by 60% by the middle of the century, and 100% of that has to be regenerative in nature, i.e. it has to rebuild the soil, be stewards of the soil, preserving water as a resource. And that's a huge, huge market opportunity, particularly when you consider that, and this is kind of Machiavellian, but global food prices are at an all-time high. We can make this transition when it makes the most economic sense, and particularly if you reference the Rodale Institute did a 30-year farm trial. The report came out, what, 2-3 years ago, somewhere around in there, where they compared, if we can call it, our current industrial ag model versus regenerative agriculture practices. And per acre comparison, first of all, equivalent yields. Interesting, in times of drought, regenerative agriculture is 30% more, 30% greater yields. Climate change kind of comes to a factor here, particularly when we're sitting right now in a pretty severe drought in California. That's interesting enough, but also 3 times more profitable per acre with regenerative agriculture when you consider externalities. Huge opportunity. And then Patrick can cover the third one, but it's around resource productivity.
But before we leave agriculture, what are these externalities? Tell me about that.
Well, I think anywhere from subsidies. I mean, the fact that nitrogen-based fertilizers, pesticides, not only as well as water runoff, the loss of our topsoils. Again, I referenced before the level of soil erosion, which is for me as a national security guy, that really scares the hell out of me. I mean, the Sumerians suffered it, the Romans suffered it. They didn't tend to their soils. We're no different. We need to take notice.
Doing this regenerative stuff, doesn't that increase the price of the product?
No, it doesn't.
No,
actually,
it doesn't.
In fact, the economics are pretty clear that by reducing the level of artificial inputs going into the production of agriculture, you're actually going to increase the end profit that the farmer takes per acre up to 300%. There's actually incredible opportunity.
I'm still safe as a political animal and President of the United States?
Absolutely. We currently subsidize the American farmer at a rate of $180 billion a year in direct and indirect subsidies. Mm-hmm. What we're advocating is that we don't take anything away from the American farmer to execute this transition. Rather, we redirect the subsidies that are creating distortions in our global and American domestic food market, and redirect those to facilitate and expedite and catalyze a transition to regenerative methods. And help the American farmer not only unlock that increased profit per acre, but unlock global markets.
And I would also throw out, just from, again, another demographic factor is that our farmers, those that grow our food, they're aging out. The average age of the farmers now are somewhere around 58, 59 years old. We need to develop a new cadre of farmers. I mean, this is a huge employment, human capital development opportunity, particularly when you consider that regenerative agriculture is high-level technology. We're not just, I mean, this is the way forward. I mean, I would reference Wes Jackson's work at the Land Institute in Salinas, Kansas. I mean, this is not just digging around in the dirt. You know, this is a high-level technology that we're going to have to educate our kids toward. We're going to have to resource it and develop a different type of food production, distribution system in the marketplace. So it's a huge opportunity.
We have 2 issues so far. Housing, because there's going to be huge demand by the next generation for their own house. Agriculture of this regenerative type. What's the third?
The third is what we call a revolution in resource productivity. As 3 billion people come into the global middle class, they're coming in and they're demanding a global middle class lifestyle. What that means when they come in is that each one on entrance, their average income goes up 300%. And right now, income is chained to resource consumption, so their resource consumption goes up 300%. With commodity prices at or near all-time highs, you can do the math. As 3 billion people come in the next 20 years, the market's only going to get tighter. And as we know from numerous examples in history, as commodity prices go up, markets don't adapt so much as states intervene when those commodities are strategic in nature. So we're really driving towards a series of resource wars. And you know, just this week we saw China drilling in contested waters, contested by both China and Vietnam for oil. Those kinds of actions are going to go farther. So what we're seeing is incredible demand for resources, but a massive need for that demand to be met with much lower energy and resource intensity per unit of GDP. What does that mean? It means innovation. It means we have to move the incredible amount of innovation we've been doing around the information technology sector. We have to drive it into materials and create the attributes of the middle class lifestyle at a much lower material intensity than is currently given. That creates incredible opportunity for the high-wage, high-skilled jobs that can rebuild the American economy, the American middle class. Those are the advanced manufacturing jobs. Those are the R&D positions. It's basic science. It's new business models, new distribution methods, and it's a consumer delivery methodology that's going to be rooted in these new places where Americans are living. Right? It's going to be the smaller mom and pop store that's going to be able to put so many Americans to work in these vibrant, walkable communities that we desire. It's an incredible opportunity, and then it drives towards our strategic goal of achieving extraordinary advances in sustainability.
Okay. And I mean, and I just wanted to look, because talk grand strategy tend to use big arm waves, but I just want to just show how those three big macro bins of demand, I mean, what do they mean for Main Street? Because Patrick was just touching on it. You know, we're talking about, you know, how does it impact the middle class America? Well, right now, our economy, if you put a buck into any sector, functioning sector of our economy, how much ancillary bang for the buck do you get out of it? Well, right now our economy is pointed at retail consumerism and services, financial services. Well, for every buck you put into those sectors, you only get anywhere from 55 cents to 63 cents of ancillary economic activity. That's where we point our economy right now. And that's the lowest end of the spectrum. If we you can strap on your sustainability goggles and think at a larger scale and start crafting policies to direct our economy in that direction. We start capturing the biggest bang for the buck available to us, and that specifically is the top driver. You put a buck into manufacturing, particularly advanced manufacturing, you get a $1.35. Agriculture, of all things, is number 2. You get a $1.20. The next is construction. You get about 98 cents, and then fourth is transportation, about 95 cents. If you take this integrated approach, again using sustainability as the core logic, you get a very systemic bang for the buck that's really quite compelling. And a great example of that is about a $100 million investment in a light rail system in Portland, Oregon, generated $3 billion, roughly $3 billion of economic activity. It's huge. It's a different model, a different approach. And just so we know that, just so we assuage anybody's concerns that it's just a politically left-leaning liberal framework, the same design framework around full spectrum sustainability it was basically the same logic that Salt Lake City used in the Vision Utah plan. Used that same kind of systems integration of the different functioning sectors coming together. It has nothing to do with political leanings. It has everything to do with what kind of communities do you want to develop, what kind of sustainable economy do you want to develop. The logic is pure, it's agnostic to political ideologies, it's just sound economics, it's sound community development. And it's, quite frankly, that in that prosperity you're going to find security of the 21st century.
And just to pick up on that point, the idea that our communities should be designed so that you're reducing the travel time within them is one of the best ways to help rebuild the American family. When we're stuck on the roads, we're stuck in our minivans, parents don't have time to be parents. They don't have time to make the family meal. They don't have time to help with homework and be a good role model. And what the leaders in Salt Lake City were looking at was a doubling of the regional population in 20 years, and a equal increase in commuting times, and the net impact on the family was going to be disastrous, they judged. In addition, the Chamber of Commerce was extraordinarily scared that the quality of life in Salt Lake City was going to go down. And they knew that quality of life was the major determinant of foreign direct investment for the high knowledge worker categories they were trying to attract to the region. So it made sense for the chamber, it made sense for the local churches, it made sense for the environmentalists and the social justice folks. It just works because you're creating communities that are saving time, saving resources, saving money.
What has been the reception? I mean, this country is characterized by an ideological divide that probably we've had before, but it's been a long time ago. What's been the receptivity to these ideas of working? Essentially, you're going to have to find a way of having us work together.
Right. My personal experience has been enormously positive. Number one, I realize this as a retired Marine. I mean, I don't have a side of the aisle that I sit on. I mean, I guess I'm independent. By oath and by conviction while I was in uniform, and now I'm out of uniform. I don't see any reason to change. So just try to stick to the facts, ma'am, kind of approach, at least as I understand the facts. That's one point. The second point is that we're not dwelling. We have to talk about the problems and the challenges, but we're not dwelling on that. And I'm not going to say that we have any solutions, but we have an approach to large-scale issues that we face. That's the difference. That there is a way forward. That the economics make sense, and it's an economic approach. And it has nothing to do with your political affiliation. It's what kind of family, what kind of environment do you want to raise your family in? What kind of community do you want to live in? What kind of government do you want to participate in? What kind of economy do you see the best opportunities in? Because right now, we do not have opportunities across the spectrum of America for an all-inclusive approach to earning a living and making a future for yourself, for your kids, and for your grandkids. That's what we're attempting to offer, and we're trying to keep it very pragmatic. We're trying to keep it actionable and grounded to what we see happening in the world right now. It's a huge opportunity. I think that's the difference. And that's why I think we have a positive reaction to our argument or message.
What doors are open to you? What doors are closed?
I would say that the doors for delivering the idea are wide open. The doors that are closed is getting the capital into play to make things real at a pace that we need it. It's just difficult because it's, to take that leap of faith, when you put, people are more willing to put their blood and sweat equity into something more often than their, a little bit of coin into something, is to actually invest in these things. And it's always frustrated me because in a lot of cases this is the most innovative thing I've ever heard of. Unfortunately, we can't do it because it's never been done before. Very frustrating in that regard.
Yeah, I think what Puck's talking about is a challenge around leadership. That as Puck was saying, we get an incredible response to the concepts. And then the nearly universal response is, okay, but where's the leadership in Washington, right? And that's a sad statement on kind of people's understanding about how the American democracy works. It's really up to us to take leadership and to exert it and to really engage and participate in our own democracy. It also speaks to a need for Americans to take responsibility for the future of the entire nation, not just their community or their pet issue or their sector, their strata of society,
or
but
their
really,
yard.
or their yard. It really requires a bigger view of citizenship and responsibility.
Well, on that note, thank you both for being here,
Thank you,
for
Peter.
sharing
Thank
your
you.
viewpoint, and for Global Dialogue. Good night.